All right, good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Anacortes City Council meeting of November 18th, 2024. I'd like to call the meeting to order. Mr. Franciac, would you take the roll, please?
Mr. Fantini.
Here.
Mr. Young.
Here.
Mr. Walters.
Here.
Ms. Kalila McGrath.
Here.
Ms. Moulton. Here. Mr. McDougall.
Here.
Ms. Hebick.
Here.
Thank you.
Do you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? All right, announcements and committee reports. A couple announcements from me. Economic Development Stakeholders Meeting, a reminder, Tuesday, November 19th, that's tomorrow. That's at noon here in Council Chambers. Rumors are there will definitely be coffee and some snacks. Can't confirm whether there'll be cookies, so please come and help out because we're looking for you to share your inputs on economic development opportunities and barriers in the city. Feedback is critical to inform the Economic Development Strategic Plan and Comprehensive Plan policies. Again, you can also provide your feedback through the Community Economic Development Survey available on the city's website that is still open. I will be available at the Senior Center on Wednesday, the 20th, from regular conversations with Mayor Miller that I call Chat with Matt, and that's 1:30 at the Senior Center on Wednesday. Anacortes Downtown Alliance invites you to Elves Night Out. Let's kick off the holiday downtown shopping season with 30 merchants offering sales, contests, and entertainment. That is this Saturday, the 23rd, 4 to 7 p.m. And then finally, Anacortes Farmers Market Holiday Market, and that's at the Anacortes Farmers Market this Saturday, the 23rd. From 10 to 4, so you can just spend all day doing good shopping. And that's all I have. Over to Council for committee reports. I do not believe Finance Committee met. Is that correct? Public Works Committee.
Mayor Miller.
Mr. Walters.
Public Works Committee met right before this meeting, exclusively for the purpose of reviewing staff recommendations on traffic safety improvements. Staff had met a couple of times along with our contract engineer to review the various requests that we've received from the public about parking and stop signs and those kinds of issues. So we largely provided feedback. I don't think a single item on that list will need to come to council for a code change. So there's not actually a policy determination. Am I right, Ms. Moulton, Mr. Young? Was there a single one that is a code change item? No, I don't think so either. There was at least one instance where no parking signs were put up, but the code doesn't specify no parking. Those will come out, and a few others. One item, though, was a person who noticed a lot of running of the stoplight at 12th and D. And their suggestion was that the city look at photo enforcement of the stoplight, which is not something we've done before. Staff's recommendation is that that complainant send that recommendation on to City Council because staff is not equipped to do that on their own, and it would be a significant policy change from the way that we currently do enforcement. So more to come there. One thing that we did advise is that anytime one of these requests come in, that we do a speed study. We have the equipment. Most of the time, the equipment is not actually in use. So we could get some data on each one of these things, and I think Public Works agreed. They also agreed to evolve the way the speed study reports are formatted, because in the past they have had some odd graphics that imply various levels of enforcement of the speed limit that they're not based on anything necessarily APD does. So they're going to change the display of the speed study reports so it provides more useful data and gets away from this kind of artificial enforcement limit. And then finally, one project that we thought would be useful to queue up out of these requests is addition of a sidewalk on 14th Street between M and L Avenue. We don't anticipate having money from our usual sidewalk budget in the next year or so because that money will likely get reallocated to South Commercial Avenue. But we do perceive that portion of 14th Street as being important, especially given its proximity to Whitney School, for a sidewalk, because there's really nowhere else to go on that section, and there's a little bit of a hill there where people speed up. So that was the Public Works Committee meeting. I wanted to note as well, though, that Councilmember Moulton and Councilmember Young and I will be holding a community meeting, sort of an Ask Me Anything session on Thursday, November 21st from 6 to 8 p.m. at the Public Library. Anybody's welcome to show up, grab a cookie, and ask us some questions or lodge some complaints.
All right, any questions for Public Works? Any other council or committee reports?
Mayor Miller.
Mr. Fantini.
Thursday night, the Parks Commission had their meeting here, and we had quite a big turnout for the pickleball discussion. I was really encouraged by the discussion as well. It was very civil, and I felt like everybody had a good opportunity to be heard. It sounded like the Parks Department walked away with some good ideas and some options for some things that could be done. And just wanted to shout out Director Lunsford and Dustin South, Bob Vox, Nicole Johnston, and Darby Jordan for a very well-run meeting and community discussion.
Great, thank you. Any other reports?
Mayor Miller?
Ms. Moulton.
Thank you. On Friday, I attended the Northwest Straits Foundation Initiative Conference in Everett, and it was a 2-day conference. I was able to go for the first day. I'm the newest member of our Skagit County Marine Resources Committee, and so there were representatives from committees from San Juan County, Whatcom County, and Snohomish, and us, and Island County. And it was fun to run into some familiar faces that I didn't expect to see and make some new friends. It was a great networking opportunity with some really, really good sessions about the work that's going on here in North Puget Sound. And what I came away with was the palpable sense of enthusiasm and passion that people have for the subject, and how they're working for marine health in our area. And instead of, we get a lot of doom and gloom about climate change, and understandably so, but these are people that are working really hard on positive change and seeing results, like in eelgrass beds, for example. So it was really great to be a part of that and come away hopeful and energized. So it was a really good experience.
Great, thank you. Any other announcements? Okay, we'll move on to our next item, which is public comment. This is an opportunity for any member of the public wishing to address the council on anything that's not on our agenda. We do have a couple items on our agenda for public comment, but I have, and those who sign up go first, and I have somebody signed up, and I have a Nina LeBaron. I think if I got that right, but if you come up to the microphone, make sure it's on. State your name and the city you live in for the record. That's the, thank you. Yes, but make sure the microphone's on. So hit no, and then the light.
Lights on.
And now say your names, because as usual, I butcher people's names. So thank you for repeating your name.
Hi. Thank you for all the good work you do. My name is Nina LeBaron.
And you live in Anacortes, I'm assuming.
I do.
Okay, thank you.
Live in Anacortes. I have island architecture, and I have a client that I did a multifamily building for on 24th Street. And she can't afford to pay for the permit fees. So she said, Nina, could you go talk to the city council, because it's all about the sewer hookup fees. If a 3-bedroom house sewer hookup is $11,000, then a 9-bedroom apartment building should be $33,000. The current sewer hookup fee has a different calculation for apartment buildings than single-family homes.
Nina, a little bit closer to the microphone.
Closer?
Or,
Okay.
or you can pull the microphone down too.
How's that?
Yeah, there we go.
So the sewer hookup fee should be based on the number of bedrooms, regardless of if it is single-family or multifamily, if it is truly based on cost of expanding and operating the city sewer system. So I've had conversations with Rob Frisinger, and he said the sewer GFC is tied to the cost of expanding and operating the city sewer system. It is over $11,000 for a new single-family home. Multifamily is charged 80% of that rate. So I won't go into the whole breakdown of the permit, but the bottom line was the permit comes to $92,000 for an apartment building that is expected to cost $1,165,000. So that represents 8% of the entire project cost, which seems a little high. And so it is based on the dwelling units, and apartments are counted at 80% of a single-family home. The rate and ratios are set by periodic studies that Public Works has done, as well as state law, and are codified in the municipal code by the City Council. If apartments are counted at 80% of a single-family home, then for three homes at 3 bedrooms, it should be $33,000 times 80% would mean the fee should be $26,400 according to your ratio. So I don't understand how our sewer hookup fee jumped to $72,000. To encourage housing being built here, please consider rolling back the SGFC for multifamily to match single-family rates. And Rob suggested that she apply for low-income designation, but she has had low-income renters trash the rooms in her hotel, so she doesn't want to do that. Thank you for your time in considering this issue, and it took 8 months to get this permit, and now it is frustrating to not be able to afford it. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. I appreciate the input. Anybody else wish to address the council? Double check our online participants. And oh, yeah, that would be great. Thank you. Okay, nothing seen or heard. I will move on to item 5, which is our consent agenda, items 5A through E. Council.
Mayor Moon,
Mr. McDougall.
move to approve consent agenda items A through E.
Second.
Motion by Mr. McDougall, a second by Mr. Young to approve consent agenda items. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. We are on to item 6A. This is a public hearing. This is our second public hearing on the 2025 operating budget, and this is a discussion item with Mr. Hoagland has this one. And I think if the goal is to perhaps get an official closure of this public hearing at some point.
Yeah, thank you,
Okay.
Mayor, members of the council, and members of the audience. So this is indeed the second public hearing of our 2025 budget season. But this public hearing is on the budget itself. So there is a statute that requires advertisement of the public hearing for 2 consecutive weeks. Last week was the first publication of that notice of the public hearing. So we're opening the public hearing tonight. We'll leave it open till next week. And then the next item on the agenda is the second read of the property tax increase ordinance. But for tonight, wanted to get the public hearing open, point out the budget book, that the draft, obviously, budget book. This has been published with the agenda packet. It's online on the city website. A lot of information there, and happy to answer any questions that you might have, or field any other comments. But at this point, open the public hearing.
All right. Well, yeah, thank you for correcting me. I always lose track of where we are in the public hearings. That's why you all keep me in line. But I just want to say once again, this is the second year in a row and that we've had a budget book kind of early on, and I really appreciate the work that you and your staff have put in, because I know I was asking for it for 8 years on council to get this earlier in the process, and this is the new standard. So I hopefully council appreciates it and gets an opportunity to look at it. But before I turn it over to council, if any members of the public wish to weigh in on this public hearing, that again I was wrong. We will keep this one open through next week. All right, there'll be an opportunity to read through it and with a fine-tooth comb, and then come back and talk to us next week. All right, council, questions, comments?
Mayor Miller?
Mr. Fantini.
I just had a question in regards to the capital facilities plan for the Parks Department. So we've had a lot of folks from Ward 3, specifically from the West neighborhood, come up and talk about the park that is planned for West 6. Right now, we have the entire balance of that to be designed and built in 2026, which seems reasonable to me. But there seems to be some concern from neighbors that maybe this is something that could continue to be pushed out. I know that council in previous meetings has expressed support of that park, and I was just wondering if it would be possible to consider, if we can't move the entire park construction to 2025, would it be possible to consider design, like maybe to put a piece of the design fee in for 2025? Then if we're able to design it, at least we can show that we have some real skin in the game and that we're going to be moving forward with that park. I didn't know how council feels about that.
Mayor Miller?
Mr. Walters.
First of all, Mr. Fantini, you are not usually as unclear about whether or not you are actually advocating for it, but I know you are really advocating for it. I also agree that we brought this up a number of times. It makes more sense to design it first than to just program in a larger number for construction. I would also note that this will be maybe the only neighborhood park. I mean, there are parks in neighborhoods, but they are very much city parks. You know, they attract all residents of the city. So there, in my view, ought to be some cap on how much we're spending on a park that is really only a couple of lots in size, and $600,000 is fairly expensive. Mr. Lunsford has indicated it's maybe unlikely that we receive an RCO grant for it, but we can fund a very moderate park on our own. I mean, what we've heard being advocated is simply maybe an empty field. Maybe it has a gazebo. Maybe it has some ADA parking spaces. That's something that we could achieve, I think, pretty easily. So I'd be in favor of allocating $50,000 or something, whatever is required for the design work in 2025. There was a $50,000 line item that we'd identified a couple weeks ago to strike out of Public Works' budget. That might free up some of the money. We have other larger revenue problems to talk about, but given where the budget sits, I would also be supportive of moving forward as Mr. Fantini suggests.
Miller?
Mr. Young.
I am supportive of, the initiative. I think for what Mr. Fantini is proposing or asking, and I'd love to hear what Mr. Lunsford might have to say at some point about it. I think that the Parks Department has done a tremendous job of servicing our city and the people of our citizens in a superb fashion. So I'm very much wanted to acknowledge that. But I do think that this community as a whole has been through a whole lot, trying to get things done, been hoping here and there. And if there's any way possible, I think that this would be something that would go a long way toward, just all of the people of our city realizing that this is a good thing. All the parks that we have everywhere else, the forest lands, just so much that makes us a wonderful place to live. I think it's just not much to ask if we can find it. I do recognize that, as the mayor has been clear about, as of course Mr. Hoagland is always tight with the money, as he should be, revenues are down. Yes, they are. But I'm hoping we can find a way to sort of seed this thought to move it forward. So I'm very much supportive. Thank you.
Mayor Miller?
Ms. Moulton.
Thank you. I like the idea of devoting $50,000 maybe to design in next year. And I agree that it could be a fairly simple park. I mean, already it sounds like kids are playing in it and playing ball, and maybe a gazebo type structure with a couple of picnic tables underneath, maybe some benches facing inward, a couple of ADA parking spots like Mr. Walters mentioned. I also like the idea of not worrying too much about additional parking to that, because this is a neighborhood park, and the whole idea is that people can walk there, people can ride their bikes there, and certainly some people will drive there, but it's on a corner, and so there should be fairly ample street parking for a park of that size. So I'm definitely in favor of moving this forward.
Right. Yeah, I think that answers the neighbor, because they keep getting, I know the neighborhood is frustrated as they keep seeing this move down the line, and if council wants to show the commitment with some design money in 2025, I think that's a reasonable compromise. Right. Any other questions, or are you going to all go home and memorize the whole budget book and then come back next week or anytime? All right.
Mayor Miller?
Oh, Ms. Moulton.
Oh, one more thing. I just appreciate all the work that's gone into this, and as I read through it and I look at the different sections of it, I learned so much. Some of it's reminders, and some of it's like, oh yeah, I didn't know this. So thanks for putting to staff and you, Mr. Hoagland, for putting together such a helpful document. I really like having that big binder that I can flip through.
Mayor Miller?
Mr. Walters.
I think that we would benefit as a council from having a larger, more high-level discussion about revenues and about our growing expenses. In 2024, I think we placed a wager on the FEMA money showing up, and that hasn't so far, and it sure seems like there is a non-zero chance that it will not show up, and that non-zero chance became a lot more non-zero after Election Day. And that's a significant amount of money to plug a significant one-time hole in our budget. But we've also got this ongoing structural problem with our budget. Earlier in the year, we had received advance notice that we were anticipating a $2.3 million shortfall or somewhere in that neighborhood because sales tax revenues are down and what we need to pay employees is up because we've had 20% inflation over 3 years. And that's not a problem that will go away even if we get a one-time infusion of cash. And that's not a discussion that we've had about how we are going to plug that ongoing hole in the budget or solve that ongoing problem. So there are certainly a number of things we can do around the edges, but I don't feel confident that, I mean, next year's budget is going to be fine with what we've laid out here, but I don't feel confident that the 2026 budget, or maybe it's not a problem until the 2027 budget. I mean, eventually these things catch up with us, and so I think we need to be thinking more strategically with more of a longer-term forecast, and just in terms of those ongoing revenues that just are not going to keep up with the rate of inflation. Inflation is something that we are able to kind of wink and ignore when it's at 1% or 2%, but when we've had this big jump, it brings it home really easily. And so if there's not a way of us to generate a significant amount of more revenue, we are going to have to fill that same sized hole in that revenue. And we haven't had that strategic conversation, and to some extent we always kind of ignore that strategic conversation at budget time because there's 1,000 line items that we're going to look at instead. But I would like us to engage in that, and it might not be something we can do tonight, and maybe it can even occur after we adopt the 2025 budget, but it has to occur, I think, in order to get us onto a very solid path where we're solvent permanently into the future. And of course, the fact that property tax doesn't grow as fast as inflation, more or less ever, will always erode that. But right now, we are in such a more significant hole, and not one unique to Anacortes, one that every local government, especially one relying on property tax, is going to experience. So I guess I would just invite some conversation on that either now or later or next year, but sometime we've got to have that conversation.
Mr. Mayor, if
Well, I'm just going to comment on the FEMA piece because I've talk about it a lot with council members and engaged with FEMA. And 2 years ago, I didn't think we were going to get the reimbursement for the outfall. So I always play pessimistically with money that we can't control, but those reimbursements are coming. This other project is an alternate reimbursement project, so it's different under the Stafford Act. But I had a good meeting with the rep from Senator Murray's office, and they will engage. You know, well, is it going to be anytime soon? I would not put wager that we will see that money in this year. Feeling okay about it coming along. So anyway, but yeah, we do have to. We're concerned about that. Absolutely. All right. Sorry, Mr. Hoagland, you were going to.
No, thank you, Mayor. As Mr. Walters makes a number of good points, I was thinking, since we do have the majority of work done for the budget book, kind of traditionally we've used January and February to do the budget book, and then in March we start on the annual report. So we've kind of got ahead of the curve on the budget book this year. So maybe in that early 2025 timeframe, the January, February timeframe, we should have a little more capacity within the department. Perhaps we can have some of those conversations that you're talking about at that point. I guess one of the things I did want to point out, again, Mr. Walters makes some good points, and we've recognized for some period of time that we have had this issue, slowdown in sales tax and other things that we could see affecting the city's financial position. So we have been scrutinizing each position as they come open. If we have an opportunity to gain through attrition rather than a direct layoff. So we've been taking a look at that, and we have been. There are a few positions that we've been holding now to conserve on cash flow, which you won't see in the appropriations in 2025. Those positions are still within the budget, but we are saving in actual expenditures and in cash out the door because those positions have not been filled. So we are scrutinizing those opportunities as they come up. I can.
Mayor Miller.
Ms. Cleveland McGrath.
So that brings up one of my questions that I can read the budget book, but I also can't quite define or be confident that I understand it. For example, we've got 7 vacancies. One was just filled in the police department. We've got 6 vacancies. My assumption is that, or my understanding is that those positions are approved, those 6 positions. But are those 6 positions actually budgeted for in 2025 with benefits, or are they budgeted for 6 months from July of 2025? How are we interpreting those vacancies when it comes to the 2025 budget?
Yes, that's a good question. All of those positions are in the 2025 budget. And I believe, as an example, with a police officer position, we'll budget that at step 1. Generally, the police officers come in at a step 1. So we'll budget that at a step 1. And I want to say the benefits package will use employee and spouse as the benefits package. So it's not the highest level of, insurance that, for a family that would cost, but it's not the lowest either. So, but yeah, all of those open positions are in the budget for 2025.
And are we, sorry, if it's okay, and when we have those positions, are those being essentially budgeted starting January 1 of 2025, or are they delayed 6 months because we know it takes a while to vet, hire and all that stuff?
Right. No. So the budget is there starting January 1, assuming that. So the budget assumes that there's a full roster January 1.
Thank you. That's helpful. That's just it's nice to know that cushion is there. But
about the the benefits, it's really important to know. HR kind of picks an average one because somebody with a spouse and 4 children is a lot. It does, it costs more. But you got to pick a number to work with.
Mayor Miller.
Mr. Fantini.
I just wanted to speak very much in favor of Mr. Walters' suggestion to have a deeper discussion around some of the revenues. I think what you're saying about us being ahead of schedule when it comes to the budget book, possibly doing that in January, I know that I would also like to suggest format. And what I mean by that is, I think a lot of times when we have conversations where we have an agenda with several different items on it, we can lose track, or not lose track, but it gets a little bit watered down, some of the items that we discuss. So I would make a recommendation, and depending on what the rest of the council thinks, that maybe we could do this around some kind of study session where we all can be present and we can all have a very focused discussion, because I know that any time that we've had that group discussion, whether it be at the retreat or whether it be the study session around the comp plan, I've always gotten so much out of it because I hear from everybody and we can all be a part of that. And if it's on a focused agenda item like revenues or the budget, you know, that I feel like that's very effective.
Mayor Miller.
Mr. McDougall.
Also a vote of support. I think Mr. Fantini said the magic word, study session. I think a couple of study sessions even would be probably pretty good. And as the member of the community that came up and spoke with us during public comment said, like, actually impact fees should probably be a part of a larger discussion as well. I know the legislature has made some changes to how we can do impact fees, so we should take a look at that also. Thanks.
Mayor Miller?
Mr. Young.
I just want to echo, my colleagues. I just think it's a wonderful thing to have an open discussion. Sometimes with just, sometimes you really just want to understand why other council members may feel the way that they do about a subject, something that may be important to them for a variety of reasons. It does lend itself to understanding the position and then in the negotiation for the best possible solution for all those things, because there's no one person that can think of everything that they really need to think about. All of us come to the table with just a little bit of bias one way or another. And what I really appreciate about all the members of council, because we really do have an extraordinary council here, we really do. And so it would be a great benefit, at least for me, to, as we go through these items, to hear perspectives on why it's important, why it's not, why it's where it is. It just allows us to have a conversation between all of us rather than a maximum of 3.
Mayor Miller.
Mr. Walters.
I think some of that interchange between Ms. Cleveland McGrath and Mr. Hoagland was useful in that positions that are held open during the year save money. They don't, none of that interaction shows up in the budget that we review if we are preserving the positions. Ultimately, to solve a structural hole, though, in the budget, we need either substantial new revenue or we need to cut positions. And cutting positions can occur via layoffs or via attrition. So attrition, much better for many reasons than layoffs. But we need to have that forecast of how long do we have to figure this out? How much cash or other mechanisms do we have to get through to a place where attrition gets us to a lower level of expense? Or is there anything we can do to achieve more revenue, especially sales tax revenue? If somebody's got a buddy who works for Trader Joe's, the advantage of sales tax is it rises with inflation. The disadvantage is it falls with the economy. But it seems to me that that's probably the path forward. And it's got to be a combination of some additional revenue, but also cuts somewhere. And what we are currently looking at is just basically funding almost all of the same positions because attrition is slow. And so that kind of by its nature takes away some of the choices that we might want to make. And so we need to have that discussion to put in front of us those choices, because in the alternative, we're just kind of sailing along with the winds of whatever happens. And it will be pretty important how we figure this out going forward, because $2.3 million hole might become larger, especially if inflation gets bigger. And if the economy does better at the same time, that would be great, but probably the reverse would be true. So this hole could get, I guess, it could get substantially larger. And then I also want to put in a plug for relooking very soon at both our connection fees, which were the subject tonight, and our impact fees. The state law change basically requires us to set our impact fees based on number of bedrooms or square footage or something along those lines. Connection fees are different, but I think it was a compelling argument. I think it probably should be that way, and that will be something that we can do once we have all these master plans that Public Works is generating during this year. But pretty important for a whole number of reasons, and the cost of housing is certainly at the top.
All right, good discussion, and we'll bring this back next week again. All right, we'll move on to other business. Other business item 7A. This is ordinance 4089, setting the city's 2025 property tax levy increase. And I know we talked about this last week. Mr. Hoagland?
Thank you, Mayor. We put together a simple visual to try and aid with the discussion in the property tax increase. So again, the ordinance for your consideration tonight, 1% property tax increase. And what we did here is went back and looked at the last 10 years, including 2025. And you can see the blue line is the CPI, and this is Seattle, Tacoma, Bremerton, or Seattle, Tacoma, Bellevue now, CPI. In 2016, you can see that was running at about 1.2%. And then we get to this period starting in 21 over 22, 23, and 24 that Mr. Walters referenced earlier, where we accumulated about 20% over those 3 years. So looking at the 10-year period, if you look at the average CPI over that 10 years, it ran at an average of 3.7% per year. And then the property tax levy, there's two elements to the property tax levy. There's 1% increase, which is available to council to approve, and there's also the new construction added to the tax rolls. So that's an automatic. Any of the new construction gets added to the tax rolls at the current millage rate. So the 1% is represented on the gray bar, and the yellow bar is the new construction that was added. So looking at that, the average of that is on the orange line, 2.9% 2016, and then in 2025 projecting to be 1.7%. If you look at the new construction over that period of time, the average for just the new construction is 1.4%. So during that 10-year period, had council not approved the 1% property tax increase, it would have averaged a 1.4% increase versus 3.7% increase of CPI. As it is, with the 1% increase, that average over the 10-year period has been 2.4%. So still, on average, about 1.3% behind the CPI. Just trying to aid in the discussion, hopefully provide some assistance, but the ordinance for your consideration tonight, ordinance 4089, is to increase the property tax by 1%, which is listed down here about $84,000.
Mayor Miller.
Mr. Walters?
I appreciate the chart. The one chart, though, that would be slightly more helpful would be to show sort of the integration under the curve. It would be to show how much a dollar starting at year zero loses in value due to CPI, and how much that 1% helps us try to keep up. I've made this chart before, and we don't keep up. It is pretty close with new construction, but it isn't close if we also don't take the 1%, which I think is also the conclusion that you were demonstrating there. But it's a little easier to see if you graph it that way. And maybe the next time we do this, we could have that chart.
Member of the public wish to comment on this item? Council?
Mayor Miller?
Ms. Moulton?
Just for a little additional context also, this is an issue at cities throughout the state, and so much so that the Association of Washington Cities last year was lobbying for legislations that would allow cities to raise the property tax by 3% for this very reason, that there's no way that you can keep up. We're always constantly falling behind. And I have heard that that is coming back again this year for this very reason. So,
Mr. Mayor, as a reminder, this property tax information is due to the county November 30th, which falls on a Sunday this year. But still a little time, but
But what you're saying is our finance director would be more comfortable if council's ready to take action on this evening.
Mayor Miller?
Mr. Fantini?
So I am pleased that we were talking earlier about having a greater discussion around many revenue sources at the city, things like impact fees and whatnot. So I'm very encouraged by that. Also, I think it's helpful, the point that Ms. Moulton brought up last week that, for a house of $750,000, we're talking about a under $11 increase. And I think that while none of us want to pay anything extra, at least I would assume most of us don't, that's a pretty modest increase. And then I think my hope would be that as we have that greater discussion around the budget and hopefully adjusting some of our fees, some other things, that maybe next year when this comes before us, we'll be able to have a greater discussion on whether or not we really need to do this or if we are able to make up with it through some different sales tax or those types of things. So,
Mayor Miller?
Mr. Young?
I just, again, I really appreciate the discussion. And, particularly, I think it informs the public of the depth of conversations that goes into even things like this. It's not willy-nilly. We just really want to apply additional taxes, but it's just the need of our city in order to continue to have the quality of services we have is crucial. So we have to look at everything. And so to the point of the larger discussion that may be coming at some point, I think we should, I hope we get the opportunity to look at all sources to see what might be the better option for us. Because again, I'm one that when we have choices, I like them all on the table, even though we may already know some are less than others. But I want us to review them and then still make a conscious decision that we think this is the best choice for our city in moving us forward. So, yes, thank you.
Any other discussion on this item or motion, perhaps?
Miller?
Mr. Young?
I move to adopt ordinance 4089, setting the 2025 property tax levy increase.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Young and a second by Mr. McDougall to approve ordinance 4089. Any additional discussion? Mr. Franciac, vote please.
Mr. Young?
Yes.
Mr. Walters?
Yes.
Ms. Cleveland McGrath?
Yes.
Ms. Moulton?
yes.
Mr. McDougall?
Yes.
Ms. Hubick?
Yes.
Mr. Fantini?
yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, next item is 7B. This is amendment to interlocal agreement 267 with Skagit County. This is a discussion item with possible action, and Chief Harris is going to present.
All right, thank you, Mayor Miller, members of council. So currently, we provide BLS training to our surrounding fire districts, 11, 13, 17, and the Connor. And Skagit County reimburses our employee expenses for those trainings. The amendment that allows that set to expire at the end of 2024. There's some desire to potentially restructure how we're doing these training hubs throughout the county, but that work is not done yet. So what's before you tonight is an extension to the current amendment through June 30th of 2025. Basically, we'll stay status quo until we come up with a new plan. Relatively straightforward, but happy to answer any questions you might have.
Questions for the chief? All right. Packet well written then. All right. Motions perhaps then.
Mayor Miller.
Mr. McDougall.
All pretty straightforward, so I move that council authorize the mayor to execute amendment number 4 to the interlocal agreement 267 between the city of Anacortes and Skagit County.
Second.
Hey, a motion by Mr. McDougall, a second by Ms. Hubick to approve the amendment to the interlocal agreement as presented. Any additional discussion? Mr. Franczak, vote please.
Mr. Walters,
Yes.
Ms. Cleland McGrath,
Yes.
Ms. Moulton,
Yes.
Mr. McDougall,
Yes.
Ms. Hubick,
Yes.
Mr. Fantini,
Yes.
Mr. Young.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Last item on the agenda is item 7C. This is an interlocal accepting the paper to digital permitting grant. And Mr. Coleman, I didn't give you enough time to get over there to talk about how we're going to receive this money and hopefully use it.
Good
Mr. Coleman.
evening, Mayor, Council, members of the public. John Coleman, Director of Planning, Community and Economic Development Department. And we've kind of got some good news here today. We applied for and been offered a grant for roughly $197,000 for what's called the Paper to Digital Permitting Grant. And what there's sort of 3 basic areas that we'll be receiving money for, and that's improvements to our development review process, and then improvements to our technical, like our SmartGov program and Laserfish connecting, so money for that, and then a large chunk of money for digital archive work, which is a painstaking process of taking paper and digitizing it and then putting it into a digital catalog, which requires the city to do a lot of manual input of information associated with each document. So that the scanning itself isn't so hard, but it's the attaching the information to it so it can be searched in a database that makes it a little bit more difficult. So we've already begun plans to spend some of this money. So you've probably heard about our plans so far is, to be improving some of the technical aspects of SmartGov. And as you're aware, we've gone out for an RFP and are ready to award a contract for a consultant to help with process flow, reviewing our development and review process, mapping it and making suggestions for how to improve it, so how it is now and how it should be, and helping us with some implementation strategies. So, and then the digitization part of this also. So if there's any questions, we'd really love to be able to accept this $197,335.
All right, questions for Mr. Coleman?
Mayor Miller.
Ms. Moulton.
Thank you. So thanks, Mr. Coleman. This is great news. And I'm just curious about if you could tell us a little bit about virtual inspections and video inspection capability. Is this something totally new? And could you give us an overview of how it works?
So that's fairly simple. So this was something that was highly encouraged in the grant application, is to implement something like this. So we looked for a vendor, and for a fairly small price, there's a service that's very similar to FaceTime, but it also has a geolocate attachment to it. So, and a storage of video function also. So when the idea is, from the office, the inspector can connect with somebody at their home and do the inspection virtually. When they activate their phone at home, we're able to, verify that they are at the location that they're supposed to be, and not just, at a showroom somewhere showing where the perfect installation would be. And then they also keep track of that information for us.
Will that actually like replace in-person inspections, or is this like going to be a money-saving thing staff-wise, or?
No, it's actually a little bit challenging for I don't know if the industry's quite caught on to how they would do like a complicated framing inspection. But if you're doing a lot, it certainly can save time if you're doing hot water tank inspections, furnace inspections, something that is a little bit more simple, where if the homeowner or contractor takes their phone and shows you around a small specific area, it can be a time saver because staff doesn't have to drive out, and maybe a little bit more flexibility of timing.
Great, thanks, that's helpful.
Mayor Miller?
Mr. Fantini?
I have a couple of questions. Great news that we got this, and happy for the help. That's wonderful. I was going to ask how we would measure the success of the project, but I think that would obviously be by improved permitting times, more transparency and understanding in that process, getting all the digital getting all the current paper archives digitized. I'm assuming that would be success of that project. So I guess my question is more around the timing. Is there like a time period that we should look to where this grant money through the training, I know there's some staff training, that kind of thing, the consultant that's coming in, is there like a time that we should look to where we should be like, okay, we have seen marked improvement by this point, or do you have any thoughts around that?
Well, that's only one part of this contract. So it's going to take us some time to do the digitization, which will help in the long run for people to be able to access the permit information that is currently paper. Someone buys a house and they're like, hey, do you have any permits for this property? And we're working on getting some of our backlog put in. And this amount of money isn't going to cover everything because it is expensive and tedious work. As far as the contract for consultant services, that's one part of this. And yes, of course, there's measurables to any contract that we have as far as what they're going to be delivering and what we expect to get out of it. So I don't want to jump ahead to what the contract's going to look like for other things, but there are measurables to all of this. And in this grant, as you probably noticed, there's 13 different deliverables that we need to provide to Department of Commerce in order for them to actually give us the money. So yes, there are definitely measures, but we haven't defined goals saying we have a goal of where we want to be, and that's what we're trying to achieve. But we're not setting a hard and fast deadline saying we want everything to be running tip-top shape in 36 days and 24 hours or something like that.
Okay, and just two other small questions. One of the concerns that I have, not really a concern, but more of a question, is as we go to this more digitized system, everything, and I know we're kind of there already, being on computers, so on and so forth, we do live in a community where there's quite a few people that don't necessarily do things on computer or through a portal system. I know at the bank, when we switched everything to online applications for loans and all of this, we still had a great number of people that came in and wanted to do it on paper, and we provide that. I'm not sure, so are we kind of saying we want to get away from paper altogether? And if we are saying that, are there opportunities for those people who are used to the papering process or have only done it that way to learn this system? Like do we provide any kind of help?
Yes, so we stopped accepting paper a year ago.
Okay.
Everything is digital. Everything is submitted digitally, and yes, our staff is trained to work with people that need help and assistance to get them to do that. Most of the work that is done is provided by contractors that have electronic capability, but we do work with the mom and pop people that maybe there's very few people that are submitting things, drawings, for example, that are going to be in paper. It's usually going to be in some sort of AutoCAD that can be converted to a PDF. We accept generally PDFs.
Okay, thank you.
So we work with staff all the time.
Mayor Miller,
Ms. Moulton.
I move that City Council authorize you to execute interlocal cooperation agreement 24282 PLN 001 between the City of Anacortes and Washington State Department of Commerce.
Motion by Ms. Moulton and a second by Mr. Fantini to accept the grant as presented. Any additional discussion? Mr. Franciaco, please.
Ms. Cleveland McGrath.
Yes.
Ms. Moulton.
Yes.
Mr. McDougall.
Yes.
Ms. Hubick.
Yes.
Mr. Fantini.
Yes.
Mr. Young.
Yes.
Mr. Walters.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. No further business on the agenda. I will adjourn tonight's meeting. Have a good night.